Leading economists who predicted the 2008 crash are now telling us to prepare for something much worse. Why? Because our politicians and bankers have not corrected the fundamental problems in how our economies function. Countries around the world are now in massive debt because of a policy of borrowing in order to spend. It's gotten so bad that many are now borrowing in order to just pay off the interest on their loans. They're in a massive debt spiral. Coupled with this is the fact that currencies have been subject to inflation since central bankers moved away from the gold standard. You see, your cash, just a piece of paper, used to represent gold reserved in the bank. It therefore had tangible value. But politicians and bankers seen that they could create more wealth for themselves and others by printing and then lending and spending paper money that wasn't backed by gold. That meant currency simply became paper and only had value if people had confidence in it. Massive amounts of cash was printed in times of recession, which was the central bank's way of stimulating the economy so that trade would occur. They would also reduce interest rates to make borrowing more affordable. This is how they reinflate the bubble and restart the cycle of boom and bust. This all becomes a big problem when a major economy, bank or corporation can't pay back their never-ending debts because of rising interest rates or for a whole host of other reasons. Suddenly, a shockwave is felt throughout the economic system as not only they default, but their creditors and their creditors' creditors realise that they won't be able to pay back the money owed, and therefore many more institutions will go bust. And that means your savings are also in jeopardy, since some banks are liable to go bust, and the currency itself will likely be thought of as dangerous to hold, thus reducing its value further, the very definition of inflation. You only need to look at countries like Venezuela to see hyperinflation at play, where money is next to worthless. During the crash of 2008, our leaders essentially gave Red Bull to someone about to sleep. They just delayed the inevitable. A correction will have to take place eventually. So when banks were failing across the world, our politicians and bankers chose to prop up most banks by putting their debts on taxpayers' shoulders and giving those banks a ton of money in recapitalisation. Our bankers and politicians papered over the cracks of a much deeper problem. You can't print money at will and expect to have a sound economy. Remember, however, that politicians will allow the printing of money mainly because it allows them to make big spending promises and then get re-elected. The level of global debt has went from $145 trillion in 2007, a year before the crash, to almost $250 trillion today. So when our giant globalized economy with all its debt and paper currency stumbles towards an inevitable recession this time around, its fall will likely be harder than we've ever seen before.